A book is a story delivery system from the mind of the writer into the mind of the reader. This is England Expects, and it's a bit where Mirabelle has a problem and she turns for help to the black market. "Fred," Mirabelle nodded in greeting. "Good evening." "I'm glad to see you," Fred smiled. "You come for a bottle of malt?" Mirabelle shook her head. "I ain't got more of those chocolates, I'm sorry to say." The chocolates had been for Vesta's birthday. She perched on the edge of a pile of boxes that appeared to contain tinned orange juice on the bottom layer, and behind her a loosely woven basket of fresh eggs. "Well, perhaps I will take some Glenlivet if you have it, Fred, but it's not really what I came for." Fred disappeared among his stock. "I got lovely bottles of French perfume. Shalimar," he called. "Difficult to come by. You can't pick up this stuff even in the Burlington Arcade these days." He peered from behind the boxes, but Mirabelle shook her head. She wore Chanel. Always had. "Stockings then. Silk, fine gauge, American." Mirabelle's eyes fell to her calves. She hadn't worn stockings today, not only because of the weather, but because she was running out and didn't want to waste what she had. It mattered less in the good weather, or perhaps her standards were slipping. She considered this as she inquired how much they were. Fred appeared, holding a bottle of whisky which he laid on the top of a wooden packing case come shop counter. "Daylight robbery, of course," he grinned, revealing toothy gaps in his smile. "You need a nice fancy man to see you right, Miss Bevan. You shouldn't be paying for all this yourself. Mr. Duggan wouldn't have wanted you to be on your own." Mirabelle froze. Fred was one of the very few people who knew about her affair with Jack. He'd been one of Jack's agents in the early days. Jack always said he was a survivor. "Fred's the cream," he said. "It's effortless for him. He'll always rise to the top. Doesn't matter where you put him, war or no war. Fred'll do all right." When Fred had gone missing in the south of France in 1942, Jack had refused to give up on him, and sure enough he surfaced 7 months later, arriving back in England off a ship from Bilbao. In an attaché case he carried a German code book he'd picked up in mysterious circumstances, and in a leather trunk he'd smuggled a 9-year-old Jewish boy who'd been orphaned. "I couldn't help myself," he said with a beaming smile. "Now you're going to want to debrief me, ain't you? The old Marylebone Hotel, eh? Well, let's get on with it. You best check I'm not a double agent now I've got a kid to look after." He was irrepressible. Some of the situations Fred had faced might crush another man, but Jack said he was an ideal agent, solid as they came, and despite his Cockney accent, he spoke French as if he'd been born there. When Fred turned up in Brighton earlier that year, Mirabelle wasn't surprised he was pushing goods on the black market. He'd always had that edge. Right and wrong were relative to him, not absolute. He was some kind of magician. That's probably how he'd survived. She'd bumped into him coming out of a pub on the lanes. "Miss Bevan," he greeted her delightedly, as if the last time he'd seen her had been a jolly social occasion, perhaps a week or two before. "I didn't know you was in Brighton. How's Mr. Duggan? Has he made an honest woman of you yet?" It had been difficult to tell him about Jack's death, but what else could she say when he asked after his old spy master? "I'm sorry, love. I'm so sorry," he said. "You come and visit me. I got a place just round the corner from the Black Horse, past the pub, and turn down a little path you'd miss if you didn't know it was there. Ignore the tramps. They ain't no real bother. Green door. I got whatever you're after."